Okay. All right. So I think we have next up, let me just make sure I'm sharing my slides now. I think I can share screen again, right? We're going to talk again a little bit about hybrid logistics. And I think Mary is on. Mary, if you're on and you can share screen. And,
I am here.
Well, it's so good to have you.
Hello.
Exciting to have you. Well, we had a lot of the hybrid logistics conversation earlier, but I'm going to pass you the screen because I know you're going to give us sort of what's going on with you guys, but also why you are supporting this whole endeavor. And then I can also, if you want me to, bring back up all the hybrid logistics stuff that we were starting to talk about, because I didn't show everything before. But everybody, welcome my friend Mary, who's one of my thought leaders, actually, from Cisco Corporation. So go ahead and share away. I'm going to turn off my camera for now.
And are you able to see my deck?
Yep, I see it.
Okay, great. And I'm going to ask one more thing. We've had some turmoil because of this whole pandemic and things going on, and I have carpet layers in my house. Can you hear them behind me?
No.
Okay, then the Cisco headset that the company gave me works. Okay, I'm just going to say that. So let me give a little bit of introduction, because I am considered an education advocate for our customers. I came from a very large school district in Nebraska. I still live there. So if you know anything about the reality of Nebraska, if I'm in a very large district, you kind of have an idea. She's in one of two towns. So anyway, I was the e-learning supervisor. My last position was, and so I was in charge of remote and distance learning across the state, in which we built out Network Nebraska, and I was part of that whole program. I was also in charge of blended learning environments that our high ability learner teachers were using to connect kids from various schools, because one HAL teacher might have 4 or 5 schools. But I also then thought differently, and that was my task of how do we think differently to reach all of the learners in our district, whether they're going to be homebound learners, whether they're going to be special need learners, maybe they're going to be learners that they have a different learning style, and we want to make sure to reach them. So that was my position prior to coming to Cisco. So as things have happened over the years, this talk that I'm going to kind of give real quick is about just reimagining education and where have we been. And I actually got to teach in the classroom that you see in that upper left corner on the MIT campus. But also, where are we going? And this is when we're reimagining what our learning space is, not just the physical space, but also the virtual space, and how we bring those two spaces together. And it's been a long road. We're still in rows in many situations, but how can we get there, and where are we going? And that's where I want to bring in a little bit of context. And I was on a little bit earlier because I said, LeiLani, this is what I love doing, is this kind of work that this whole workshop is about. Do you mind if I step in and I listen in? And, so I'm going to give you some context from the Cisco side, but I'm also going to say, ask for us to demo. And in fact, I can be one of those people that can show you what does a learning environment look like with a collaboration tool that can give you everything that you need in one-stop shop, so you really change the culture. But I'm also going to say, look at the context of what it is that you need for your campus post-pandemic, for the users, for your network, for the devices, as well as the applications. And there's really those 4 pieces to think about. Now, I'm always most concerned about the user experience, whether it's the teacher, the students, but also how does that experience, what does the network need to be? And, as we went into this school year, many CIOs said, Mary, our biggest fear is what is the new normal of our network? What is it that we need now that they are, used to using devices and they want them at their fingertips in the classroom, to where many times they had devices in carts and they used them occasionally, and it wasn't part of that every lesson type of learning. And so they wanted to know, what is their new normal as these devices and the applications are being used? And so what's the insight that you can get on that? And, one thing that we look at is a product that we have called DNA. And, DNA can allow you to have that look into what that space is. at your district level, if within the building level. And you can know, hey, certain areas haven't been used, so we don't need to send the custodial staff to those areas. Or at a glance, I can say in one desktop glance of, hey, where is the density of my student population? Now, as a building administrator, I love this kind of a tool because I'd say, okay, how come all of a sudden at about 2 o'clock, I have such a large mass of students in one area? Well, we'd always want to find out. But also there's another piece to this. And this is that digital and the signage that you can do of having that welcoming space to say, hey, what's the temperature inside, outside? What's the air quality? What's our capacity of visitors today? Those are all things that give your community that sense of security, that you have that data at your fingertips anyway. It's real easy to push out. And again, here we're talking about some of the things that we start thinking about monitoring through the access points and through this platform that we call DNA Spaces, so that you can truly help navigate this new normal of facilities and what's going on. And again, we talked about this about, you can even then notify cleaning staff, hey, you do not even need to go into this area today because there's just no need. But I want to get to the teaching and learning side. And this is where I just love this piece. And it's about that platform for education, creating that flexible environment in which we're really thinking about security. We're thinking about interactive and engaging in platforms and applications, but we want a consistent experience across our district, across multiple schools, and across our workforce so that we really impact the culture, so that it's not so siloed in applications, where we know siloed applications really are one of those pieces that, cost our districts extra money. So this is a huge piece to us as we're thinking about consistent experiences. And that's where I always say we have to start now thinking about, how do we create an elastic campus? That's that campus where we start thinking about, well, what do we need for today? But tomorrow, we may have a need for certain people to be remote, or all people to be remote. Or we may say, hey, we have different models of learning in which we're going to choose these types of experiences, but we want that elasticity to be able to flex it whichever way we need it for our teachers, our staff, and our students, but really for our community as a whole. When we think about these spaces, we have to think about, what does video look like in these spaces, from the very small spaces up to our large spaces, and how does that really impact the teaching, but also the learning? An important piece is, do we want the students that are coming in remote to be an integral part of this classroom, to where they're part of the conversation and they see the students and they can interact with the students via chat for that period only? Or do we start thinking about, oh, you know what? Are they going to be just kind of, you can listen in? Or do we need to start thinking about the experience of our community when we're doing something like a school board meeting or something like that? Again, when you choose one platform, you're thinking about that elasticity of that platform. Now, this is where I get into my work with the Learning Council that I really love, because I have always said when we choose models of learning, we're really thinking about the synchronous and the asynchronous, and where on the continuum is this model of learning that we need to do for these students, whether they're in AP World History or whether they're in, a high ability literature circle in 4th grade. We need to be thinking about that calendar, the roster, space and motion, and then, of course, the use of the online tools. And that's the piece that we kind of dug in on and said, let's look at the network, the collaboration tech stack, and say what is needed in every model of learning that we offer to our community. And what we found was so interesting that the tech stack stayed the same. It just moved on that continuum also. So if we were in a traditional class schedule, we may not use much of that synchronous video, but we may use more of the asynchronous video so that students with different learning models or that maybe need to look at that curriculum or content again can easily get to it. Or are we looking more towards that hybrid simultaneous? And then I haven't even brought up hybrid logistics on this slide, but I think what's really interesting is this continuum that we're thinking about always is the calendar, the roster, and space and motion. And I think we're going to start through this reimagining of education after this pandemic, and with the technology tools that we've been talking about, it will help us move forward into where, and I love the conversation you were having about ST Math earlier. Did you know Cisco provides the funding for ST Math? I mean, that is one piece that we're very proud of. And in fact, I have a link at the end of this deck, I'll make sure you all get, of our corporate social responsibility education partners, in which we are trying to make sure we're funding so that our districts around the globe, our educators can use those types of resources. But are we starting to think differently about our role? And I love Ellen's comment about, how the highly qualified teacher, as well as the different levels of teachers. And if we have a facilitator in the room, as opposed to maybe a teacher that is going to be doing that direct instruction that's highly qualified, is there a difference? And so we need to be thinking about that as we move forward into these spaces. Now, this is the one that I love the most. And this just speaks to things that I have always wanted to do, but I think it comes from my 3rd and 4th grade year in elementary school. I was a child of personalized math. They took the entire 3rd and 4th grade classes in our building to the auditorium at one time of the day. And we had these laminated file folders, and you just had to work through the content by yourself. It wasn't dynamic. I did not enjoy it. And I just hopped through hoops and I didn't understand very much. And I regressed in math. And I kept thinking there's got to be a better way. But they were thinking, oh, all of the teachers are here to be able to help students that need help, but you can move at your own pace. Well, yeah, some of my friends, they moved 2 and 3 years ahead. I actually regressed. So I think about, how does technology help us do this differently? And I think that's where we're really going. And I'm excited about this. And that's one of those pieces that we're continuing to say, how can the data that is on the network saying this is what this child has completed to what proficiency, and this is his engagement, we can know that because the camera in his laptop or in his tablet is telling us he's engaged, or just as a day's pull, yeah, I'm just completing the assignments. I mean, those are some of those things that we're really starting to work for. Now, I do bring up this room because I think this is a perfect example of a hybrid room in which the teacher is doing direct instruction, but the students that are remote are still also very much part of that classroom. And when one of them speaks up, they come up onto that front screen as well, so that all the students, much like when we're in the classroom, we look at the students as they're talking as well, because we want them to be a very much part of that room. And so let's think about hybrid learning to make sure we give them the tools that are truly easy to use. Not, oh, remember how to plug this microphone in? How do you plug the speaker in? No, a teacher should be able to walk in that room and through artificial intelligence, be able to just say, start my class, or it knows, hey, it is now time for your math class. Would you like me to start it for you? And you can just speak to the system and say, start class, and it dials in everybody that needs to be dialed in automatically. We'll also give you transcription and translation services if you need them. But I love this next part, because when we start thinking on the K-12 about facial recognition, we can opt in a couple of ways. We can say, just count the number of people in the room so that we can do a count of, hey, do we have full class sizes? How do we need to readjust class sizes? Things like that. But you can also link it to the student body database for attendance, and you can opt into those types of pieces because of facial recognition. Now, again, high fidelity audio and video. Notice the word audio comes first. audio is so important that even if the video tends to degrade a little bit, we keep the audio important and shape a group of students. So it's not just one student, pull a group of them together into one video frame and switch that back and forth as if students were looking around the room. And I think that's an important piece as we start thinking about how can we truly have authentic interaction that is comparable to face-to-face, but I'm not going to say that is the same as face-to-face because nothing is ever the same as face-to-face. Just like I would love to be with you today, right there in the room. Now, again, when you start thinking about the integration of technologies, you have to think of standards-based. And that's why we're always thinking about what is it the school districts may be using now or in the future, and or who do they partner with that they need to be able to make sure these things are integrated. We do this not only with our collaboration systems, but making sure that we're doing that with other systems that are looking into the network. For example, the acquisition that we just did with Thousand Eyes. How can we now make sure that we are helping you know on the network where there is an issue so that you can report back to Hoot Mifflin? Yes, it was your network that allowed us not to get to the content. Or we can say to the state during that critical high stakes test, yeah, it wasn't our fault. It was on your end that we had these problems. These are those things that we're always making sure at Cisco is listening to you, our customers, and saying, how do we standardize on what we're doing to make it enterprise level, ease of use, and totally integrated. Now, I bring this slide up, and I'm not going to talk too much here, but just know it's about interoperability, integration, and support the life cycle as we think about the classroom. How can we support pulling in subject matter experts from within the community, from with other communities to where we can say, you know what, that history class is within our district, but we have to have, you know, maybe 2 or 3 buildings, bringing them together. And this is where that hybrid logistics, meaning that just in time for you to have direct instruction could be used. But then again, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we may start thinking about, you know what, an AP World History course, and we want to make sure that we can pull in neighboring districts for that highly qualified teacher. Again, these are all things that as we think about reimagining what our education spaces look like, they need to be ease of use. Now, I told you I'd give you lots of resources, and here's just a few. Again, check them out, but notice at the very bottom, the corporate social responsibility partners that we have, people like Talking Points. If you have not checked out Talking Points, I think you would enjoy it. It is an application where the parents say, this is my language that I would like to get communication from my child's teachers and administrators. And then what they can do is they can do a simple text into that space, and then it will be a chat to the parent in the language they want to receive it in. And again, this is all visibility and things like that. But check out those as well as our new Networking Academy, because what we've done with Networking Academy is said there are introductory level courses that you can provide your teachers and your students and take those modules and embed them within your curriculum. Those are things that we offer free. We've always offered the Networking Academy curriculum for free. And I loved, Chris, when you were talking earlier about St. Vrain in Colorado, because they just opened this fall, the Cyber Security High School. That theme, which the first high school that they opened up was just for the Networking Academy, and you can get your CCNA. But now this third high school that they've opened recently and has the Networking Academy, you get a cybersecurity certificate by the time you graduate. These are all things that I think are really important as we want to continue to help our customers. But I'll leave you with this. Technology should make sure that it leverages time, opens up time, and maybe even reduces some of those menial tasks that we're having people do, whether it be within our IT departments, within our teaching departments. But it also should restructure those learning activities so that we are providing rigorous instruction. And so with that, I'm going to stop and ask for any questions.
Okay, and I'm watching for questions too. And if nobody pipes up, then what we're going to do is just kind of launch off into another conversation until we come up to the part where we're going to do our panel. And I'm going to ask Doug to make sure he gives me a time notification because I think.
And wouldn't you know, just when it was time for me to present is when they started hammering. They were so quiet for so long, and I'm just so apologetic.
Yeah, that's what happens. Well, now we know you've got new carpet, so we'll come over there and make sure we take our shoes off. Okay, so a lot of what you said, I'm going to share my screen too, was so essential. That big company like Cisco is aligned with knowing where the market's going. You're not just selling tech like so many companies are. You're actually thought leadering, into where things are going. Like this is so critical. We're going to join with you, we think, probably, what is it, ISTE in New Orleans, and play the game. So I want everybody on the call to know about this. So there's a picture on this slide of the game. We played that in Dallas, and all the Texas districts and some of the other districts there from all around the country kind of flipped out about it and wanted to take the game board home with them. This game is available for any one of you guys in your districts who wants to play it. What you would have to do is send it to somebody that can do high quality color print. We have a print version that you can print on 11 by 17 paper and then sort of put together and play it as a board game, like on a big table. And then everybody gets their roles. These people were walking around on the roll board that we had there and playing this game of the future of hybrid logistics. And people that had been in the classroom for a really long time were like, this is interesting. What do you mean? The students are in here and I'm over here in my office, but then here I am on my next step. I'm floating in there and I'm helping a student. And now I'm doing this and now I'm doing that. Teachers were super excited about it. It was very interesting to watch people live the reality of hybrid logistics and kind of where this digital transition could take us all with changed space and time dynamics. So, Mary, anything else you wanted to say about that?
No, I think that's the biggest piece is we're super excited about when you start thinking about applications, thinking about the standards of those applications, and then how do they work with the workflow of the district and of your learning. And I guess I'm one that always says, a good learning specialist that also has digital learning design capacity truly are worth their weight in gold. And one that can truly then lead a team of teachers that you may have on special assignment, to just really think about, well, what do digital learning modules, what should they be like? Because you know what, our teachers are they're great teachers, but this for many of them is new to learn how to design learning modules. They know how to do it within the classroom, but to do digital ones, they need those resources and that help. And so sometimes just one person that has that special skill set to be a team leader is so huge. I've really seen that.
Yeah, I've really seen that too. And that reminds me that one of the things we should tell everyone today is that it's a time to be really curious. Like, how do you do this well, and just get into it, in every way. Like, how is software built so it has good UI UX? What does that mean? Like, what is a signifier in digital? Like, should the buttons be fatter when they're little kid fingers because their coordination is not so good? There's just a million things to be curious about right now. It's actually a very, very exciting time. As awful as the pandemic has been and continues to be, it's also exciting because there is real transition. I know you're going to chime in on that too, Mary. Yeah.
Yeah, there just absolutely is. And I think and Ellen said it too, is we definitely don't want to so much reinvent a wheel, but this is the time for us to take from what we learned during the past couple of years and not regress back to what it was and or before, but to take those skills and what we've learned and truly reimagine where education should go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I have everyone else chime in too alongside you, Mary. Anyone who wants to comment in about the rest of this. So we're going to go back to, you showed this too. Just reiterate, this probably the direction the market's going to go first is keep the structure they've always had, which is individual teachers in individual classrooms assigned to Carnegie unit hours for the bulk of their core curriculum. But carve out somehow in the time of the day, or maybe one day a week, a large homeroom block. And then push in there, I think someone suggested earlier, CTE, it might have been Drew, CTE, all the other extracurricular remedial as needed, which could be done by courseware that teachers are overseeing. And then this sort of changes a little bit what you're going to be, doing with your time. So that's probably the first direction people will go. And that'll look kind of like this. This is like, move your library into this, have your library be this space, or collapse a couple classrooms where you can pull the wall between. But somehow just sort of reimagine space and time, but do it incrementally. That's kind of the beauty of what the EduJedi came up with. It's like, hey, this isn't an overnight shift, because how's that ever going to happen in education? Never. It's like some superintendents have said to me, it's like, yeah, I feel like I'm driving a battleship. And you know how hard, if you've ever driven a boat of any size, it doesn't have brakes. So the only way you manage is you got to have a long prediction path to slow down. So that's sort of the future of hybrid logistics is sort of embodied in that model. So let's talk about who's actually doing this already. So if you haven't run into Mountain House High School, which is based in Lammersville ISD in California, they were the first district 3.5 years ago to start talking about actually moving to a hybrid logistics structure. And they were one of the initial EduJedi to instigate the creation of hybrid logistics as an automation point. So I'm getting my hand signals now. We have 5 minutes before we start the panel. So Lammersville ISD was doing one, but when we got into it with what would be needed, they actually showed myself and several of the other EduJedi how they were doing it, which was with sticky notes on giant whiteboards as to how they were going to manage space and time for all the kids. This is just one high school. It was a brand new, unbelievably beautiful high school in Silicon Valley, but that's the way they were actually having to manage the automation of this. And then the other places doing it is the classical academies. There's probably quite a few others. These are just the two we were going to mention, but they had to do it because they manage in San Diego celebrity kids, kids who are on in the Olympics or something like that, where they needed really, really flexible, personalized paths, but they still wanted to have intersection with small group cohorts and teachers and have the class-like feel. So they had to be really innovative, and they started the thought process as well. So these are a couple places that we wanted to mention instigated the hybrid logistics automation discussion. So anybody have any questions for me about that? Going once, going twice.
Thank you for the example. I'd like to hear of more schools too.
Oh yeah. And there's probably other places that are doing, like Summit Public. And if you remember the School of One in New York, they were doing substantially similar things. This is just two that we're mentioning. But keep in mind the automation, Patricia, didn't exist. It still doesn't. It's coming, right? Like I think it's about a week away. The first demonstration of the project is happening tomorrow. So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. So if you think about what we've been talking about so far today with tech model architecture, it's a really big stack, and you tech people are probably reading this right now. Drew, I know you're familiar with it, and Chris is. This is a lot of stuff to deal with, and those little tiny colorful boxes represent a scant minimum of the bajillions of apps percolating around in all of your grades in every single subject. Besides all these other things that you need, such as your major software systems for testing, student information systems, learning management systems, grading. But you'll notice this gray box between those software systems and all those little apps, and that is workflow. So where you want to put your attention right now is the workflow of things. So when we were talking to you about hybrid logistics, the whole conversation is around putting math algorithms behind the automation of the flow of work for teachers and for students. And this is really why Cisco got behind this. Mary, do you want to make a comment there? Because this tech stack sophistication increasing because of all the stuff to the right of it is your purview.
Yeah, truly. I mean, and I think, you know, a lot of you, and I know Steve and I have even had some of these conversations, is when you start looking at everything that must be on the network, it's truly everything now. Your lighting, I mean, facilities, heating, air conditioning, all of that. And so thinking differently about what kind of network do we build that is for teaching and learning, one for the facility. I mean, those are things that we're looking at, is building that type of network that can navigate them both in one full network. Many times people have, built out separate networks. But as you pull this all together, in that it's the workflow and the routing of this that makes you be smarter and not necessarily work harder. And let the network and the AIs do that type of work for you and give you that information that you need. And I think the biggest piece is just working through that and really documenting and writing it out. What is it that you need? And, where does it go? And that's why we keep acquiring companies like Thousand Eyes and Duo and things like that, is to make sure that we can, really help you with that workflow and routing. So it's important to us.
Yeah. Yeah, Mary, I don't know if you were on, but at the very beginning, we talked about the way out is the way through, because a lot of places trying to go back to normal and they're backsliding a little bit, like Ellen talked about. But one of the messages, one of the takeaways from all the data that we're looking at is the way out is actually increasing your tech stack way more. Okay, so there's just a couple other points, and then we're moving on to the panel because we have Derek who's joined us, and I think Steve is already here as well. So 2 other points. Pacing guides need to be associated in, and your digitization, you need to be truly digital with what you're using. And then you need to rework your spaces. So that's really the sum of what we were going to talk about with hybrid logistics. And we are asking everybody to get involved with this project, like not just the Edu Jedi who are already in on it all, right? But everybody. We did a first email as Learning Council on behalf of the Hybrid Logistics Project, and 2,500 people signed up. Ellen, I think you were one of the first ones. So we're trying to work through all of that now, but we're still telling everybody, you got to get involved with this project. So there you go. So Mary, thanks again. Yeah. All right.
I had to unmute real quick. Thanks for the time, and see you soon. Take care.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.